Hi there and welcome to this week's Club Room. I'm Adam and today we're going to be looking in a little bit more detail about open events and what considerations clubs and classes will need to take when deciding if it's appropriate to hold an event and what to do when their event's going on. So first of all, I'm delighted to be joined by Racing Services Manager Neil, who's going to look at this in a little bit more detail with me. So first of all, we've seen a number of clubs and classes already starting to run open events. So what would be your top factors and considerations to decide if it's appropriate to run an open event at your venue?
Yeah, I think really the key things you need to consider. Firstly, what's the purpose of your event? What are you actually trying to achieve with it? And how does that fit in with the restrictions at the minute? So, for instance, if it's an event which is normally all about the social and the gathering of everybody on shore and going for a pint afterwards and all that sort of stuff, can you really still deliver that kind of aspect of the event? So that may lead you to one decision. Whereas if your event is more aimed towards the out and out racers, where it's just about going out and banging out as many races as you can, then that's probably going to take you down a different path. So about thinking about what is it that you're trying to achieve with the event, who is it you're trying to cater for, and can you still deliver that? I think is probably the top thing to consider. I think once you get past that, you then need to kind of have a think about, well, what sort of size of event can the venue realistically handle? We've still got to manage social distancing on shore, so that's maybe going to reduce the capacity of the boat park and the surrounding areas for what we might normally have for a larger open meeting. And then finally, kind of, are you prepared to be able to scale up or down at short notice? We're seeing as we move through this current pandemic that we're moving into a situation now where things are going to change very much on a local level, and they're going to change with fairly short notice. So we need to be prepared to, today we might be full steam ahead, and tomorrow or the next day we might suddenly be having to cancel because there's a local lockdown. So are we prepared to be able to take that risk and to manage that situation?
Great, thanks for that, Neil. And I think the British Youth Sailing Regional Junior Championships is a great example of that. So there's different capacity at different events based on their factors at their venues and their local area. So that's a good example of where event sizes is very different across the country as well, I think. So if a club's decided they're going ahead and they're gonna run an event, what additional measures should clubs consider and organisers putting in place for these events?
Yeah, I think that the first thing you need to do is really consider the timeline. So when's the event going to be, and then sort of start working back from that. And what is really where do you get to your key go, no go decision points or decision gates where you have to make final decisions and things. And that should help you with being able to plan out your approach as we run up to the event and deciding how big or how small it has to be. I'd also suggest clubs or classes, when they're considering this, do a bit of scenario planning. So, okay, this is our ideal, this is what we'd like to do, but if restrictions were to change a little bit and to look more like this, then this is how it looks, either increasing the size of something or allowing more of one aspect or having to reduce other aspects. So kind of thinking about how the event might change. We're recommending that the organising authorities appoint a COVID officer to kind of have the overall overview of all the different aspects of the event and thinking about how we manage the COVID risks. Now that depends on the size of the event, whether that's a dedicated person or it might be somebody who has other roles within the organising committee or the event organizer. It just depends on the size of the event. But part of their responsibility has got to be to write the COVID risk assessment. And as part of that, I think on the water is likely to be the easy bit in organising. We all know how to organise sailing events, and we can probably do it with less people than we normally would. The really difficult bit, I think, is going to be managing people on shore. How do we do that? And I think what event organisers need to try and do is really think about the current route through the event, both from a competitor perspective, but also for your volunteers and your race team members. So what interactions do they have as they arrive at the event, go through the process of registration, changing, rigging up, launching, whatever it is, and how can we either eliminate those interactions completely or reduce them to something that's going to be can be done in a socially distant manner.
Great, thanks Neil. And just to add to that, I think with clubs and classes, anyone that's got any sort of thoughts, concerns, or any questions, I would encourage you to people to speak to their regional teams, so the performance managers or the regional development officers, who would have the information from the sort of local area on the ground as well, and be able to support you there. So we do have our regional teams for clubs and classes to help with put Neil's thoughts into actions as well. Neil, you said the on the water bit's the easy bit. However, would there be anything in particular, any considerations we really need to make sure we follow on the water?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the on the water side, we need to remember that all those risks that we considered pre-COVID are still there, and we can't forget them. So I think it's important that the event organisers don't become fixated on COVID and forget about the bigger picture. So if we've done a risk assessment in the past and we've decided that we needed to implement a certain mitigation, then before we change that because we think that COVID's introduced a new risk that we might want to change it, we need to consider what impact that's going to have on the other risks. So for instance, if we've previously taken a decision that we're always going to have ribs double manned when we're safety boating, and we think because of COVID maybe we want to single man, well, that's fine, but we need to consider, well, what drove us to that original decision that we wanted to be double manned? What were the risks that we saw when we did that risk assessment, whether it was 5, 10 years ago, however long it was, that led us to that decision? And do those points still stand? And if we want to change to do something else, such as single manning, well, what else do we put in place to make sure that the overall risk level, considering all risks, is still kind of as low as reasonably practicable?
Yeah, great point that, Neil. And I think as an example, being some clubs that have gone to single manning have simply put more ribs on the water single manned per number of boats, and that's just one thing they've done in their risk assessments. But no, great point you make there. And I think as a team, we've been promoting communications key during this whole pandemic and making sure any changes to your policies and procedures are communicated out. And I think that's as important as ever. But at these events, it's also just as important to remember getting those key safety messages out that we used to get out are still just as important as the COVID policies and procedures that we share with the teams, and especially the safety teams prior to any event. So no, great point there. Thanks, Neil. But no, the other one then, Neil. So I know you and the team did a fantastic job with the return to team sports framework. And it's at first I saw a lot of single-handed opens happening, and now we're seeing more double-handed events happening. But what considerations or measures do sailors and event organisers have to take before deciding if it's appropriate for events with mixed households sailing together to take place?
Yeah, sure. So this the return to team sports framework is something which has been released by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and so we made a submission to them as part of that of the guidance. So you can see the guidance that we've produced on returning to mixed household sailing. But since there's kind of 4 or 5 really key points that we can draw out of that. The first and most important point, I think, is that there's an expectation all participants need to do a pre-attendance official symptom check. So what that means is before you leave the house, everybody needs to consider, do I have any of the symptoms of COVID? and you can find the most up-to-date symptom list on the gov.uk website. So everybody should think about that before they leave the house. We're also recommending that it's really up to participants to kind of consider their own personal risk. So if you're one of the higher risk categories, you might want to consider whether or not you should be taking part in the event. And we also expect there's a certain level of personal responsibility that people are going to have. You know, we're not here to police things. We're not an enforcement body. Sailing always has been a self-policing sport, and there's the same with this. There should be an expectation that people are going to behave sensibly and respect the procedures that the organizer has put in place. I think some of the other things worth picking up on is the track and trace system. So any event should have records which they retain for 21 days of those who are going to be involved in the event, both from a competitor and volunteer support perspective. And then there's also although with mixed household sailing, we're now accepting that in certain circumstances on the field of play, to put it into the DCMS wording, where social distancing isn't going to be possible, what the expectation is that social distancing will be maintained at all other times when we're off the field of play. So effectively, when we're on shore, normal social distancing of the 2 meters or 1 meter with additional mitigations should apply.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Neil. And then finally, you must hear from lots of clubs and classes with the job that you're doing at the minute. Do you have any other advice or thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly lots to learn from those first events which are just starting back up now. And everyone I've spoken to have been really keen and willing to share their knowledge. So I'd certainly encourage anyone that's thinking about organising an event to look at the events that are happening at the minute or are being planned at the minute. You know, have a look at the event websites, see what kind of things they've got in place for registration, for protests, for socials, how they're doing those kind of things. Don't be afraid to reach out to other event organisers for a bit of guidance. And the other thing I would say is, as you kind of picked up on earlier, like at the RYA, we're really in the process right now of planning for regional junior championships and also our youth nationals. So the regional performance managers are actually right at the heart at the minute of trying to put into place our guidance and our practical level for those events. So please reach out to your regional performance managers who are doing that at the minute and should be able to support, and certainly ourselves here in the office should be able to help if anyone's got any questions as well.
Great, thanks, Neil. And that's almost a perfect streamline to our next guest, because we're now going to be talking to the team from the 2000 class who just did their 2000 nationals last week. So yeah, perfectly set us up for that, Neil. And thanks for your time today. Right, so I'm really pleased to be joined today by Kev O'Brien and Rob Burridge from the 2000 Class Association, who ran their national championships just last week. So before we start, just first like to say a big congratulations to Rob and Sarah, who I believe are our new national champions. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So for the reports from last week looked really good. So Kevin, we obviously know what Rob's highlight was, winning the event, but what would you say your top highlight from the week was?
I think the top highlight is everybody coming up and saying, well done. You know, I think it was loads of people came. In fact, you know, congratulations on getting the event online, you know, delivered. You know, it took a lot of hard work, but we got there in the end, and just seeing everybody getting on the water after lockdown was really nice to see. You know, youngsters getting on the water, everybody just enjoying themselves.
Oh, perfect. So like you've just said, there was a lot of events cancelled earlier in the year, and the pandemic's kind of affected a lot of activity this year. So in the build up to the event, what were the sort of key actions you and the club went through to get it all up and running?
So we were basically having Zoom calls right from kind of March to the event. We're trying to interpret the kind of guidelines from the government and the RYA, and just try and how can we work around it? How can we work with it? We come up with all kinds of ideas. Initially we're going to go into kind of fleets and have fleet racing, flights, so we can reduce the numbers within the boat park and everything else. We looked at, well, we purchased Zyte masks, so we made a contribution from the fund in the association to buy Zyte masks, and looking at extra boat storage on the shore. So we negotiated with the harbour master and got extra boat spaces that we could put in place social distancing on the shore. But we were positive. I think, Brixham were very much positive. We were positive. We kept, some nights we were like, should we just give up? Should we just put a notice out and say, let's not put this event on, let's look for 21? But we kept pushing, kept positive. Brixham did an outstanding job. They looked at their kind of catering aspects and the club, and did a lot of work in the social distances. So they reduced their capacity of their venue, which tied into our event. So we had reduced capacity on the kind of social, particularly the dinners and such. So yeah, lots of work, lots of brainstorming, lots of ideas, but we eventually got there.
Oh, amazing. Thanks, Kev. So that kind of leads me on to the next question. So Rob, on the sort of shore side, what additional measures were put in place at the event itself, and was it noticeably different?
It was different to what people have seen before. It was just trying to really make sure that people didn't gather in a group was one of our key factors. We switched everything to online. So the race briefing was done by the club the week before, so that was available on YouTube. As a class, we did Facebook Live. Kev did Facebook Live. There was a great success before every day, start of every day, and at the end of every day. And all the notice board was all online. It was all via WhatsApp. So everything was set up electronically for communication with competitors, so people didn't have to gather, looking around notice boards, going to briefings, those sort of things. And then it was the distancing on shore. It was about having 3 distinct boat parks with a maximum number of 13 boats. So in a double hander, we had to keep each area under 30. So we had 3 distinct boat parks fenced off, and everybody had to wear the masks in the boat park whilst rigging, whilst launching, and then again while recovering and de-rigging. So we had mitigation in place as well as the gathering requirement. So that was good. We had to sort out on the shore in terms of all the catering arrangements had to be done by WhatsApp. That was all booked with the club. The club had to put the food in 2 sittings, and you had to book your sittings and your menus. So you just arrive at the club, menu choices done, timings done. So there was none of this, big groups around the bar, unfortunately. So we did lose out a lot on the social, but we did put an event on, and that was probably the downside was the lack of social. Brixham have got a COVID secure status because they're on a commercial premises, so they had 60 covers of food available, and they had all the normal one-way system, sanitisation, professional staff, as you would do in a professional pub. And I guess another one of the big areas is lack of changing rooms and showers. No club I know has got those open, and that was a non-starter. So people just had to be told that right up front, made aware of it, so they could arrive and make their own arrangements. Showers and change rooms were only available for emergency use. And then right at the end of the week, the prize giving is another traditional area for heavy gatherings. So we had to come up with a process. Prize giving was invitation only, limited to 30 people. We had to make sure that people were all isolated and within that gathering. That was all broadcast live on Facebook. So we had people who were in the main room of the club and outside the club watching it live. And I know there's a lot of sailors who weren't at the event watching it live. I think we had a couple of hundred people watching it live at the time, and several hundred views during the evening and the day after. So it really is embracing the technology and making sure we comply with the gathering of 30 was the key point for the shore side.
Yeah, amazing. I know I've actually seen your prize giving. I've never been to a 2000 event and stuff, but I saw the prize giving. So yeah, it just shows what technology can do and how we can sort of embrace it in these times. So no, it sounds like really slick stuff on the shore. The water-based stuff potentially wasn't quite as complicated, some might say, but was there any difference on the water? Did you have to put anything else in place from a safety side or anything?
A few things. We had longer start lines. We wanted to try and avoid too much close contact. So race officer was working very hard on square lines and longer lines just to try and spread things a little bit. A lot of risk assessments put in place by the club for differing wind conditions, with the added complexity of if there were rescues had to take place, and the support boats needed to have all of the PPE available in the support boats and so on. And to try and make sure that wasn't needed, we did lower our maximum wind limit. We have a maximum limit in the class anyway, and we did come unstuck with this one. Unfortunately, on the Thursday, as Storm Ellen came through, we were right on our maximum for the class and probably could have raced, but being prudent, being cautious, taking the RYA mantra and the government mantra of be prudent, be cautious, we did lose a day's racing then when we probably would have raced outside COVID. But that's the price to pay. At the end of the day, we got 7 championship races and people had a holiday. And I think even the people who would have liked to have gone sailing were saying afterwards, well done, we did have a good week. So apart from that, the racing was pretty much the same. There was nothing else different. We were a bit lucky. We were going to split into flights, as Kev mentioned, because we had over 50 boats entered initially. A number of people dropped out for various personal reasons, accommodation reasons. I think it took me a bit of a surprise, the number of people dropping out. So we were able to get it down to a number where we could race as one fleet. But we did have a plan B in place for racing in flights.
Okay, fantastic. No, so it sounds like a good event, and it sounds like you took that that sort of cautious approach with the wind limits and stuff, which I think a lot of clubs are doing as well, which is great. So finally, do either of you have any other advice for clubs or classes looking to organise events at the moment or in the future?
I think I would say that it's the attitude of the organisers. You've got to have a team that's got a can-do attitude. We were lucky. Championships are booked 5 years in advance, and we ended up with a team at Brixham who, last year we were planning in January, February, we were planning as normal, and then the world sort of fell apart, and the attitude was, we can do this. So we've got 2 ways to go. We can put this in the too difficult pile, and we can all just not do it, or let's talk about it. Let's brainstorm, as Kev said earlier. Let's just figure ways around it. Let's all start reading the guidance and the legislation and see what can be done, and just think outside the box of it. So you've got to have all organisers with a can-do. If anybody doesn't want to go with that attitude, it's not going to work. You just got to accept the fact that the event will be different. If you've got templates from previous years and this is the way we've always done it, it's not going to work, I'm afraid. You've got to have an attitude to be different.
Yeah, one of the things we did early on was we sent out a survey monkey to the membership, just to kind of lay out the kind of what our thoughts are. Would changing rooms put you off attending? So we could canvass our membership and the entrance to say, if this is in place, would you commit? And I think engaging with our membership early was pretty vital. There was a good one of the questions is, what's the kind of latest that you would commit to a championships? And I think we said 6 weeks. So we had that kind of date and that deadline that we could work to, and buying in, telling the membership what we're trying to achieve, how we're trying to achieve it. I think a lot of people supported us as well, the membership, in order to try and get and deliver this event.
Fantastic. No, well, thanks for your time tonight, guys. It's been awesome getting a little bit of an insight into your championships and everything that surrounded it, and it looks like it's been a fantastic event, and well done to you and the the team and the club as well for putting it all on. I know my class, I sail a GP14 at the minute. We're looking to do our championships there next year, so I'm already looking forward to that, and feel I got a bit of an insight into the venue, having never been there, just following you guys on social media and with your reports. So yeah, the technology
Brilliant.
actually gave me an insight into a venue I've never been to. So no, yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
And I think there's a knock-on effect to having the Facebook Live and the debriefs. You know, that we would definitely use, you know, once kind of world goes back to normal, because I know there were lots of people who were logging on in the afternoon, people who were at work, people who were at home, logging into Kev's Facebook Live update, you know, where he just wandered around the dinghy park and chatted to people. You know, that's nothing to do with the situation we're in. It's just about open communication and trying to create a community feel. So I think having been forced down the route of going electronic, there's big dividends to be paid there in terms of community feel for any class.
Yeah, no, definitely well said. So that's it for this week, everyone. And please like, share, comment on the videos that we're producing. And if you do have any questions over any events that you've got coming up, or if you want to ask anything with regard to the current pandemic, please do get in contact with the RYA team. We've got a great wealth of knowledge in the office, so please just contact us if you need any further advice. Thanks a lot.